as a writer, isn't that what you're supposed to do? I'm able to hopefully go into someone else's soul and say, well, what would that have felt like if it had happened to me? History shows us what happened, but fiction shows us how what happened made people feel.
Hello and welcome to Elena Meets the Author. I am your host, Elena Bose. This podcast explores how authors create a world we want to escape into. Join me as we demystify the magic that authors use to keep us turning the page. Today, I'm speaking with Marjan Kamali about her award-winning, best-selling, terrific novel, The Lion Women of Tehran. Above all, this book is a great story. It traces the lives of two childhood friends in Tehran in the 1950s who come from very different backgrounds, and yet their bond seems indestructible. We follow these two girls, Homa and Ellie, as adventurous, playful seven-year-olds through to adolescence and young adulthood and beyond. We learn about their dreams and hopes, which are very different, losses and struggles, joys and sorrows. And we read about how the seemingly indestructible friendship is jeopardized by a single act of betrayal. I am not a foodie, but this book could make me one. Marjan describes in mouth-watering detail the various Iranian dishes full of simmering spices that these girls feasted on. First, Homa's mother cooks for them when they're young girls, and then they learn to replicate these dishes throughout their lives, reminding them of earlier, more innocent times. I want to go to the popular Café André in Tehran and eat that salad Olivier sandwich that the girls would eat during their lunch breaks from high school, the place where Ellie first spotted the handsome Mehrdad. Marjan also makes me feel like I was smack in the middle of these neighborhoods, uptown, downtown, the schools, the bazaar, the parties. I felt the freedom these young girls enjoyed walking down the street in their stylish clothes in the 60s and 70s and their beehive hairdos, which makes when they lost it all in the 80s so much more painful. The cycle of protests and crackdowns and time in prison, the government listening in on phone calls, reading letters, spying. But really importantly, Marjan is careful to keep the turbulent and violent times in the background. The story of these young girls who grew up to become amazing women is always in the foreground. Marjan, hello and welcome to the show.
Hello, Elena. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I am so happy to have you. I really just loved your book. I couldn't put it down. It was this, just got lost in the world of these women and all their friends and where they were. It was, and I've never been to Iran. I feel like I've been there, and you do it in it's all about the story. It's a great way to learn about history without really realizing you're learning about history, if you know what I mean.
That's the best way to learn about history.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So I read that you were actually working on another story when the idea for this novel came to you. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, after The Stationery Shop came out, my second novel, my career changed because that book was a bestseller, and I felt under great pressure to write the next one. And I had written over 100 pages of this other novel that was about moms in suburbia and firstborns going off to college. But when the pandemic happened, on Instagram, I found the posts of my own old childhood friend, and seeing her face again just brought back so many memories for me. I was flooded with not just memories, but emotions. I felt as though I could remember the texture of our friendship. I could remember her mom. I remembered how we used to play together every day and share our dreams. And I realized how these friendships we make in childhood really shape us, because her influence on my life has lasted, even though the friendship hasn't. And so I just thought again about how friendship breakups are just as heart-wrenching as romantic ones, except we don't have as many songs for them. Though my daughter tells me Taylor Swift does, which she would.
She does.
Yes. But what I knew in my heart then that I really wanted to write the story of a broken friendship. So I had to take a deep breath, put aside that other book that I had
Yeah.
started to write. And that's when I started the Lion Women of Tehran. And I made up Ellie and I made up Homa. So they're not mean, they're not my friend. But I deliberately made them born the year my mother was born because by doing that, I could show the arc in the background of the women's rights movement in Iran.
Because they meet. So was your mother born in 43?
She was.
Because they meet in 1950. And so I
Yes.
guess, and the rights movement was then in the, like mirroring the US, basically, or a
Yes,
little bit.
a little bit behind. I mean, the women's rights movement officially in Iran began in the 1920s. That's when the first women's rights organizations began. So throughout the 20s, 30s, 40s, women were working hard, organizing. And then in Iran, a lot changed in the 50s, which, coincides with Ellie and Homa's burgeoning friendship and their girlhood. And then as they come of age in the 1960s, in the early 1960s is where when women got the right to vote. And then a lot of laws were changed that had harmed women to benefit them, such as marriage laws, age of marriage, divorce laws, child custody laws, all of those things. And so we see as Ellie and Homa become women, how their womanhood sort of echoes this expanded world. And then in the 70s, so much of that is actually taken for granted, but then those rights are later taken away. So that's a movement in the background, but the core of the story is this friendship between these two girls who later grow up to become women.
I loved, I loved the whole book, but I really, the beginning where they become friends is so innocent and sweet and authentic. Playing hopscotch, that annoying boy, Homa's personality when she's tapping Ellie in the classroom, all of it. You're right there back because we all were 7 at one point.
It's such an important time, and I feel it's such a fleeting time in real life, but also on the page. In a lot of adult novels, we don't spend too much time in girlhood. But I think this time that you're mentioning, the girlhood, when the sassiness and innocence and confidence is still there in girls before it gets sort of eroded with adolescence and all those insecurities. It's such a special time. And I really enjoyed writing those scenes and being there with Ellie and Homa. Like you said, when they're playing hopscotch or just having their first quote unquote play date, the first time you go to a friend's house, a lot of times that first strong friendship that you have in your childhood is your foray into the world outside of your family. And that strong bond that you create with a friend sometimes is like a blueprint for later romantic relationships because you're learning how to navigate the world that doesn't associate with your own family in any way. So when Ellie goes to Homa's house, it's really the first time she's not in a relative's house for a long time. And she's like, this is how this family functions. This is what their kitchen is like. This is what her mother is like. It's really a way to open up your eyes to blueprints of family dynamics that you maybe not didn't know existed.
Yeah, you're right. It's sort of the first time you see that families can function very differently than your own. And also, it was a very pleasant family that she was experiencing, unlike her home life. So that was all very interesting. Your descriptions of Tehran back in the 50s are so authentic. What were your sources? I imagine your mother must have been a good source.
Yes, it's always a compliment slash slight shock when a reader writes to me and says, I love how you brought to life your childhood in the 1950s.
I hate that. I hate that.
And then on the one hand, it's a huge compliment. On the other hand, it's like, how old do I look? But yes, I did rely on resources. And obviously, there's a lot of nonfiction books you can read, which I did. There's a lot of fiction books you can read. I read less of those, but yes, I did. But again, I was in a position of privilege because I had access to all these people in my family who had lived there in the 1950s. And so, both for the Lion Women of Tehran and for the stationery shop, because they both take place in the mid 20th century in Iran, before I was alive, before I lived there. And I only lived in Iran for a very short time. So I bugged every known relative. And a lot of people didn't want to speak to me. They were like, oh my goodness, enough with the questions. I don't know. We just did what we did. We lived our lives. And I'd be like, no, but can you please explain to me what you were wearing and what your shoes looked like? And where in particular did you eat when you were in college? Did you go out? Did you eat in the cafeteria? So I bugged a lot of people, but yes, for the Lion Women of Tehran, my mom was my number one victim, and she did speak to me. So Ellie and Homa go to my mother's high school. They attend her high school. That high school is real. She described it for me. And I needed to know, how were you seated in the classroom? Did you each have a desk? Did you share a desk? Like, tell me about the layout and the teachers. And particularly, as you mentioned, I needed to know everything about what they ate because I am a foodie. And so it really interested me. And Cafe Andre is real. Cafe Andre was there. And a lot of my readers who do have experience living in Iran write to me about the food and say, oh my God, I used to get that sandwich.
Tell me again what's in that sandwich, because I read it and I thought, no, that sounds really good, but now I've forgotten.
We need to talk about the sandwich because it's one of my favorite sandwiches of all time. It's called salad olivier. That's how we pronounce it in Persian. It came to Iran from Russia. So it's actually appropriated, but it was brought to Iran from Russia. And I believe it was first served at the Hotel Moscow by a French chef. But then came to Iran, and through places like Cafe Andre, it is now just part of the national cuisine. So you really want me to go there? I will describe it. It's chicken, potatoes, peas, carrots, pickles, mixed with mayo and lemon juice, salt, pepper. And so a lot of my Russian mom friends tell me they add chopped green apple, which the Iranian version doesn't do. But
interesting.
I can't tell you how good it is.
It sounds really good. And on any bread?
Ideally on French baguette, that kind of a bread.
Can hold it. To hold it.
That needs to hold it because it can spill. It can kind of get out. I do have the recipe up on my website, FYI.
I saw you. Yeah, you've got a few recipes.
Yes, from the book. Yes.
So are these things that you cook all the time now?
Absolutely. Every single dish that I mention in the book is something I make on the regular, except for the first thing that Ellie and Homa eat on their very first play date. When Ellie goes to Homa's house and sees that magical stone kitchen, those pastries with the pomegranates inside is something my great-grandmother made. And one of the regrets of my life is that I never got that recipe because I used to love those. Everything else I make regularly. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I eat regularly.
Fantastic. Now, one of the things that I loved about your novel is how you would drop these nuggets of information, but never too much until the time was right. My curiosity was constantly piqued and the plot moved at a good pace. A perfect example of this is your opening pages. Would you mind reading the first 2 pages of your book?
Absolutely. All right. So the book begins in 1981. So chapter 1, December 1981. I stood on the lacquered floor, a small woman in black with a rectangular name badge on my chest. My coiffed, contented look was calculated so I'd appear not just satisfied, but quietly superior. In America, I'd learned the secret to being a successful salesperson was to act like one of the elite, as if spritzing perfume on customers' blue-veined wrists were doing them a favor. A sea of haughty New Yorkers swerved to avoid my spray. Thank God for the more down-to-earth women, the cooks and bakers coming up to the first floor from the basement home goods section. They were too polite to reject the fragrant droplets I offered. Orange, lily, jasmine, and rose notes nestled in the lines of my palms and the fibers of my clothes. Look at you, Ellie. Soon you'll take over this whole brand. I'd better watch my back. My friend and coworker Angela, returning from her cigarette break, sidled up and whispered in my ear. The scent of her Hubba Bubba gum couldn't hide the smoke on her breath. I shivered at the reek of tobacco. The bitter, sour notes would forever remind me of one long ago night in Iran, the night when an act of betrayal changed the entire course of my friendship with Homa and both of our lives. From the moment I'd read Homa's letter last night, I'd been a wreck. I batted away Angela's compliments, said I wasn't doing all that well, really, and that I had a headache because I hadn't eaten all day. I just might faint, I added, with a touch of melodrama. It was a relief when Angela was whisked away by a needy customer. My mother always said the envy of others invites the evil eye to cast doom on us. She'd often told me that being perceived as too competent, happy, or successful could summon misfortune. I knew belief in the powers of other people's jealousy and the jinxing of an evil eye needed to be cast off. But at the age of 38, in the middle of that massive Manhattan department store, I was still unwittingly beholden to superstition. The truth of who I was could not be escaped, nor could the flaw I had spent years trying to quash and erase. The guilty one had always been me. Earlier that morning, in our apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, my husband, Mehrdad, had tried to comfort me with breakfast. He prepared toast with feta cheese and cherry jam. He brewed bergamot tea. But I couldn't eat or drink. The jam was made from Homa's recipe. The bergamot tea in the white teapot adorned with 2 pink roses reminded me of her. With the arrival of her letter, her absence dominated my life all over again. When I'd first seen the red and blue bordered airmail envelope, I'd assumed it was from Mother and would contain the usual mix of laments and updates about the dangerous political situation in Iran. I knew those letters were probably opened and read by regime forces, but my mother often didn't care and wrote bluntly, "Aren't you lucky, Ellie? You left and escaped the violent demonstrations and deafening riots. You skipped our country's slide back into medieval times. Women have lost decades, no centuries, of rights in this country. I'm glad you're sitting comfortably with your professor husband in America. Thank goodness you got out." But when I pulled the onion skin paper from the envelope and unfolded it, my heart almost stopped. For there on the page was the unmistakable curly Q handwriting of my old friend, Homa.
Lovely. Thank you. In those first 2 pages, which, as you say, take place in New York in 1981, you drop these thematic nuggets that hark back to Ellie's life in Tehran. You mention the smell of Angela's of Angela's cigarette smoke, reminding Ellie of a night long ago. You mention Ellie's friend Homa and betrayal, the evil eye, and how it's dangerous to invite the envy of others, as that can lead to misfortune. You said in an interview that part of storytelling is knowing what to reveal when. Can you tell us about that process? Do you plan these nuggets at the beginning of your writing, or do you write the story and then drop them in later? How does it all happen?
I write the story first, and I'm not one of those novelists who plots ahead of time very much. So, we have our plotters who maybe write an outline, as many of my friends do, and then they write to the outline or to their index cards that they've pre planned. I'm much more of a pantser, writing by the seat of my pants in that first draft. And
Pantser.
so, pantser, yeah. I just kind of let it all out, and I'm trying to discover the story in that first draft. But once I myself know the story, then I go back and I'm very meticulous with what I reveal when. And there is a deep intentionality with the order of things and with the nuggets that I include. But I can't include the nuggets until I write to the end. So then I go back and rewrite the beginning. So thank you for noticing the nuggets and for saying what you said, because all of those were very much put in intentionally in the first chapter.
Yeah, that first chapter is fantastic. Do you want to talk a little bit about Ellie giving that pizza slice to the homeless woman?
It's symbolic. In the first chapter, we don't know Ellie all that well yet. We know she's worried about the evil eye. We know she's just received a letter from this friend from whom she's been estranged for so many years. And we know that it sort of rocked her world to even hear from this friend again. When she gives the pizza slice to the homeless woman, that one gesture contains, if I dare say, multitudes, because first of all, we see there's a part of her that's generous. She really wanted that pizza slice. She was hungry. She wanted it. She was really looking forward to it, and it smelled really good. And then she gives it to the homeless woman. So we see she's generous, but we also see perhaps there's a part of her that feels she needs to atone for her existence. Ellie spends a large part of her adulthood, up until a certain point later in the book, atoning, as though she has to do good in order to be okay in the universe. So we see there's some sort of innate guilt in her. And the third thing we see with that one gesture is her worry of, but for the grace of God go I. So she sees the homeless woman, feels an emotion of generosity, feels almost like, how dare I have this pizza slice? Let me give it to her, like that guilt she carries. But the third thing we see is that she's very worried about fate. And please, God, let that not be me, because that could be me. And
you
so
put in
let's
that-
make sure it's not me.
That little detail about the homeless woman having perfect teeth.
Yes, and that detail is so that the reader sees, you know what? That homeless woman maybe one day was you. She has really good teeth. She did not grow up on the streets. She ended up on the streets due to the randomness of the Wheel of Fortune.
Yeah. That was, you're just like, oh, what is coming in this book? Homa and Ellie are very different people. Homa is from a modest background. She doesn't care about wealth. She wants to be a judge when she grows up. She wants to right unfairness wherever she sees it. Ellie's family has a lot more money. Ellie is prettier, and Ellie marries Mehrdad, the boy everyone has a crush on. And yet, Ellie is jealous of Homa from the first time they meet, when she sees that Homa is missing her two front teeth, and Ellie wishes she was too. Can you talk about their friendship and what attracted one to the other?
Yes, Ellie, to begin with, perhaps by nature or perhaps by the nurture of her narcissistic mother, she has a jealous trait. So Ellie is almost like primed to be jealous. I think in that, when they're 7 years old, in that first scene when they meet, Ellie isn't that into Homa. She's like, who is this girl? She's annoying me. She's poking me. She's giggling. Where's the friend I thought I would meet? But she can't help but be won over by Homa because Homa has a characteristic that Ellie covets, that many people wish they had.
Mm.
Homa is unabashedly herself. She's comfortable in her skin. She has nothing to hide,
Right.
nothing to cover. She is not insecure. She's a confident soul, and she believes what she believes, and she believes it with aplomb. She doesn't feel as though she needs to adjust or tweak in any way, which Ellie does. So I think Ellie is very much attracted to Homa's natural charisma and to Homa's confidence and how she feels comfortable in her skin. And what does Homa see in Ellie? Well, let's see. I mean, I think Homa is, she has that proverbial heart of gold. And maybe she senses Ellie's discomfort. Maybe Homa is one of those people whose vibrations are tuned to other people's pretty well. And she sees this girl and she's nice and she just wants to, basically, initially, just wants to play hopscotch. Uh, and then I think in Ellie, she sees a lot of potential that's being unmet. And she's no fool, Homa. She knows that Ellie's family life is actually kind of worse than hers, even though Ellie ends up having more money and initially had more money. She knows Ellie craves having a father and that Ellie deep down wishes she had a different mother. So I think Homa is just very empathetic and takes Ellie into her fold.
Yeah. And I guess from the very beginning, Ellie was a new student. So,
Yes.
yeah, that was
Yeah.
it. It was great. How did you balance the historical accuracy with the storytelling? Was it difficult at all? Did you have to make any difficult decisions in that regard?
Well, in writing historical fiction, and particularly in writing historical fiction that's about Iran, I have to be very accurate. So I did not make up any historical events. I did not make up any political events because I knew I would be fact checked, which I was. I was fact checked not just by, my parents in many cases, but also by Simon and Schuster's fact checking system.
Right.
We were very careful because I personally, I don't want to make up a historical event that did not exist
No.
for the purposes of my story. So everything I write about that's historical happened. Ellie and Homa I made up, their friendship I made up, their families I made up, but the Women's March that happened in Iran in March 1979, I did not make up. Thousands of women did march in the streets for days on end because they were worried about what may come. And so, the revolution, the war, all those things are historically accurate and fact checked. Now, here's what I think about the balance. I think if you want to read a history book, you're going to read a history book. There are many history books, excellent history books about what happened in any country. If you're reading fiction, I think that reader wants a story. They're there for the story and for the characters. So, personally, as a writer, I like the historical events to serve as a background and for the relationship between the characters to serve as the foreground. So it's like in a classic painting where you have the foreground and you have the background. And sometimes what's happening with the characters is in harmony with the background. And sometimes what's happening with the characters is in disharmony with what's happening politically or historically. And that's the tension that is actually, real life. So that's the balance I strike because I always think back to what E.L. Doctorow said. And if I may name drop at this moment, he was my
Yeah.
professor in my creative
Oh.
writing. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm very
That's
proud of
amazing.
this.
Where was that
Yeah,
at NYU?
that was at NYU's
Oh,
MFA program. He was my creative writing professor. And he said, and he's known, this is one of his favorite quotes, that history shows us what happened, but fiction shows us how what happened made people feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so much more interested in that. I'm so much more interested in the people than I am in like, okay, in blah, 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 this happened. Like, I want to know, wait a second, how did that make the people feel? How did that affect a friendship? How did that affect a romance? How did that affect a parent-child relationship? That kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And for that, did you go into your imagination?
Yes, I did go into my imagination. So when you're writing about the feelings of these people that exist only in your mind and who are living in a time and place where you were not alive, right? And you weren't there, much to, I know some people think I was, but you use your imagination. But one thing that happens, and this is why I'm very fascinated by the writing process, is that once you get into the flow of the story, the characters take over. And so it's not like I have to work all that hard once I'm in the flow. Before I'm in the flow, it is not that much fun. I won't lie, because it's a struggle. But once you're in the flow of the story, I didn't really have to think too hard about what does Homa feel right now. Homa let me know what she felt, as only she would. And I didn't have to sit there and say, I wonder how what Ellie's mother said makes Ellie feel. Ellie made it crystal clear. I mean, how could I not know? You borrow from an emotional well that's within you, from similar experiences you may have had, but you also access an emotional well that's not within you, but that's within our humanistic emotional well, if you know what I mean. It's there. It's in the river that exists for all of us. It's just that you have to access it. So sometimes when people say, oh, this must have happened to you, you know, there's some traumatic events in the book. And I say, no, thankfully, that did not happen to me. But as a writer, isn't that what you're supposed to do? I'm able to hopefully go into someone else's soul and say, well, what would that have felt like if it had happened to me?
It sounds a lot like acting, the Stanislavski method of acting.
It's so much like acting, the method acting.
You method acting, exactly.
Yeah. So, there are some weird things you end up doing. In my first book, the two characters fell in love by standing on opposite sides of a tree because they couldn't be seen together in person. Long story. Yeah. So, yes, did I spend time with my back up against a tree, literally, feeling the bark? I did. Because how else could I describe it? And I made my husband stand on the other side.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I'm like, talk to me. It'd be like, what am I supposed to say? And I'd say, listen, I need to know if I can hear you, depending on the width of the tree trunk.
Oh, how funny. The one scene that I found, because I like to talk about the whole book, so I'm sorry, spoiler alert. The movie theater. That one I found very difficult to read. And it must have been really difficult to write about being in a burning movie theater. How did you do that one? I mean...
Well, I didn't initially, you see. So when this manuscript went to my editor, the movie theater scene was about a paragraph or two. And I summarized
And it was a real life thing, obviously.
Yes, it's based on a real event. This isn't a spoiler because this happened in real life. You can look it up online. A Cinema Rex, a movie theater in a city called Abadan in Iran, was burned to the ground with people in it. And this event was so tragic, so traumatic, that it helped foment the revolution at a much more accelerated pace, because a lot of people at the time attributed this burning to the Shah's forces. And it was later discovered that it wasn't actually his forces, but the damage was done. It was too late. People were furious. So this was a traumatic event and hard to write about. So I summarized it in my little paragraph. And then my editor came back to me and said, oh, that scene, you need to draw that out.
Mm.
And I did not wish to do so because it was hard to write. And I said, oh, really? Because can I just, it happened and then, we move along. And she was like, I really think it deserves more time on the page. So it was not easy to do. So there are techniques you can use. And as you know, what I ended up doing is I couldn't be in the point of view of the character who was in the cinema because he doesn't even have a point of view in this book. And I wasn't about to give him one as he dies. And so, which in my other in stationery shop, I do have the point of view of his character as he dies, but I just didn't want to do this now. So I envisioned how his wife would have imagined every moment of that scene.
Right. That's easier because you knew Homa so well.
Yes.
So you could.
Yes. And I could do it through Homa's POV. And it was easier because I knew her so well. And it was also a little bit easier because I was one step removed from the man who was literally in there.
Yeah. Your title, The Lion Women of Tehran. Homa is clearly a lioness as she fights to protect women to the end. But are there other ways to be a lioness, more subtle ways? Would you say the term lioness applies to other characters in your book?
Yes, I would. Of the two friends, Homa is the easy lion woman because you just look at her. She has a sense of social justice from when she's a kid. She becomes an activist at a very young age. She sees an injustice. She wants to fix it. She goes out there to try and fix it. She's out on the streets marching till the, spoiler alert, very end. And so Homa is a quintessential lion woman. She's a lioness. But I think you can be a lioness even if you don't do all those things. So when we think of Ellie, Ellie wants to be pretty and loved and adored and to marry a really nice guy and to have children and to enjoy the simple pleasures of life or the luxurious pleasures of life or occasionally what Homa would dub the bourgeois pleasures of life. But that's who she is. And I think she is also a lion woman because it takes an extraordinary amount of courage to live a very ordinary life, to be at home, to be holding down the fort, to be the wife, to be, quote unquote, the mother, as though that's a simple job, which is not. It's not at all. And so, yes, Ellie is also a lion woman. Through my readers, I have learned that some believe Ellie's mother to be a lion woman. And that surprised me because I didn't. She started off being such an archetype of a narcissistic parent. But they showed me the parts of her that did require a tremendous amount of courage as well. And so there are different ways of being a lion woman.
And she, later tells Ellie that secret, which she could have told her years ago. And that was a nice gesture of hers. You knew she really, as Ellie discovered, she really loved Ellie. So she was definitely a narcissist, but she fought for her in her own way.
She did. And her withholding that piece of information from her daughter was a selfless thing to do because it allowed her daughter to have her image of her father not be tarnished. And it gave Ellie this sense of safety and comfort that my other parent was this way, even though he wasn't. And so, yes, that reveal, I think, does show the mother's generosity. Whereas in a lot of other places, you don't see that generosity of spirit in her.
No, not at all. She's a clear narcissist. She's quite fun to read.
She's a piece of work.
She's a piece of work. Yeah, I know. I enjoyed when she when she came to New York. She could not believe the food. That was very funny. The fish fingers, the tang.
Yes, yes,
And that also brought me back to what people used and the TV dinners.
right. Which at that time, we forget now because we're so health conscious.
Yeah.
But at that time, those foods were lauded. Those foods were like considered wonderful. It's like, look at this. We can eat this.
Yeah.
And we're so cool and we're so advanced.
But she knew. She knew.
She knew.
Apart from the cinema scene, were there any other scenes that you found very difficult or challenging to write or not so much?
Oh, yeah, so many. I mean, obviously, what happens to Homa when she's young is deeply traumatic and changes everything when she's imprisoned. And those were hard to write. But again, I was abetted by Homa's own spirit in those moments. And, I do things to the level of my own comfort. I don't like to get too graphic with violence or with sex. I just don't like to do that. And I feel like enough is said and enough is implied. So I don't want to re-traumatize my reader.
No.
But those were kind of hard. And what was also a little hard was that scene that we just touched upon where the mom is in New York and she has that conversation with Ellie at Bloomingdale's at the 40 Carats Cafe, which to my delight in my research, I discovered frozen yogurt was invented there. And that was kind of hard to write because initially I didn't really have that scene in. And that was also
It was good.
encouraged. Yeah, yeah. So my editor wanted that.
I went to Berkeley also, by the way. And I was there in the early 80s. Yeah. And I discovered frozen yogurt. So your timing, I was like, because this was in the early 80s, wasn't it?
This was in the early 80s, and you went to Yogurt Park, did you not?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just loved.
Yes. And it's still there.
Oh, really?
And it's still there, and it's the one thing on this planet that has remained exactly the same, and it looks exactly the same.
Oh, my God.
And anytime I visit the Berkeley campus, I go to Yogurt Park.
And any topping. I remember those toppings.
Yes. It was so fantabulous. It was at the time kind of a new thing, right?
Oh, it's totally a new thing. And I used to love TV dinners and Bloomingdale's. I remember because I went to Bloomingdale's kind of in the late 70s.
The
and
heyday.
It was its heyday.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love the fact that you said was it the Queen Elizabeth went to visit Bloomingdale's? That was perfect for Homa's mother to hear that.
That did it for her. She's like, if it's good enough for the Queen of England. Those are nuggets of research that are delightful to discover, to know, oh my goodness, the Queen of England. Because I was sort of researching what happened with Bloomingdale's, what would make Homa's mother acquiesce to entering this department store. And then I realized, there we go. That would do it for her.
Perfect. And was it easy? I mean, it's a perfect job for when with Ellie. I was like at the beginning, and I was thinking, how did you come up with that job? It shows how her life has changed. I know those spritzers, perfume spritzers. Did it just sort of, and also because it dealt with scents, and you talked about the scents that are embedded, and those are sort of similar to what I would imagine in the bazaar in Tehran.
Oh, wow. Thank you for noting that. To be completely honest with you, I didn't make the connection that the sensory, the olfactory sense, but you're onto something there. Yeah, the perfume spitzer. Originally, I think there were iterations of other jobs for Ellie. She had other jobs. And then, it's so funny when you're in the first draft mode. One day, I don't know, I was maybe washing dishes or something, and I thought, oh my God, she has to work in the cosmetic floor of a department store and spritz perfume. Part of it was, it is a job that I associate with that time period, the early 1980s.
I like that. What would you like readers to take away from the book?
Well, I think A few things. Ideally, I hope that this read is healing because Homa goes through a lot, Ellie goes through a lot, and I don't think it's the fact that we don't have losses in life, because we all have losses in life. We all experience loss, but it's the way you maybe at the end of the day balance the losses in your life with the gains in your life that matters. And I feel that Ellie and Homa have a healing both individually and in one scene together. And so I hope that it's healing to finish the book. The other thing I hope readers take away is that freedom is fragile. Freedom is not guaranteed. There was a time, which we see in the book, when women in Iran felt like their rights were good. They were done. They were guaranteed. And then we see that the pendulum can swing and those rights can be taken away. I cannot tell you the disbelief and the incredulous aspect of this, some of the aspects of the revolution previous to the revolution. People were like, of course that wouldn't happen here. Are you kidding me? That can't happen here. Look at us. We are the most, however you want to phrase it, progressive or westernized or whatever country in this region. Those things can change. And I also, it's scary because you just don't realize how quickly things can change. And the other thing I hope they take away is really the lasting influence of friendship. And you don't need to stay in touch. You don't need to continue the friendship for that friendship's influence to matter and to shape you as a person.
Those are both very good hopes. And I think the first one, it's very topical. And if you're living in the US, it is very scary now. Hopefully our government, constitution, but who knows? And
it's hard to know. And we need the Homas of our world, don't we? God bless Homas.
Yes. I think you put in some point that Ellie just wants Homa out there to fight the fight that she really doesn't want to do.
Yes, you go do it, please. Yes.
Are you reading anything great now that you can recommend?
Oh, yes. I have a lot of books, as I'm sure you know, that I get sent ahead of time, and I'm supposed to either endorse or not. So a lot of times I'm reading books that haven't come out yet. And I've been reading some great ones, but they're not out yet and they won't be out for a while. But one book that is out that I'm reading that is sort of my little summer pleasure is The Wedding People.
Oh,
yeah.
I interviewed her, and isn't it great?
I love it. I really do.
Yeah.
And I love how it's paced, and I love the balance between funny and serious, and it's just a pleasure. And at the end of the day, honestly, that's what reading should be.
Yeah.
And I want people, when they read a book, whether it's my book or somebody else's, to feel that this is a time they're giving themselves. That's a joy. That's a pleasure. That's interesting and engaging. Doesn't mean bad things don't happen, but that feels good as opposed to a chore.
Totally.
So this book I love. Yeah, The Wedding People.
Okay, great. No, I couldn't agree with you more. Who knows if we'll end up cutting this, but I remember seeing a therapist once and her saying, what books are you reading? And I was just reading newspapers and magazines. And she's like, you really need to read books because you can get lost in that world. You still are learning a lot about human nature. You're learning all the time with books, but it's different. And this was a long time ago, probably, I don't know, 15 years ago, but it just has stuck with me. That I really always want to be in a book because it's a joy. Is it costs nothing, next to nothing. And you can be,
Absolutely.
I was lost in their world, and there's nothing better. So,
I totally agree. I really think books save us. They keep us grounded and they keep us tethered. And stories for me are the best way to learn about the news and to learn about history because you get such a deeper perspective and
yeah,
a deeper education. I could read an article in a newspaper and I can read the headlines, but when I read the book, when I read a book and I'm immersed in the story, I really feel like I get to know that whole world. And you travel through books, you
mm-hmm.
time travel through books, and there's a lot of therapy in
Yeah,
reading
yeah,
because you feel less alone and you see how other people have felt what you felt, even if they live on the other side of the planet, or it's just a
exactly.
very immersive and healing experience.
Yeah. Last question. Are you working on something now?
Yes, I am. I'm working on the next book as we speak, and I'm in those early days where I'm discovering the story. And much like the Lion Women of Tehran, I've been writing in my notebook and seeing where the characters that are just developing take me. And much like the Lion Women of Tehran, I'm surprised every day because I see, oh, okie dokie. I thought we were writing this book. Apparently, we're writing that book.
Oh, funny. Is it in Iran or no?
It continues to be, all my books so far have been in both Iran and the US. I can never be in Iran alone because I can't imagine, due to my own background, being in one country, even for the length of a novel, when I write the book. So it's in Iran, the US, and now a new country, maybe. Maybe.
Ah.
During our interview, it's also in Australia, but once the book comes out, if it's in Timbuktu, please allow me that grace.
Totally. That's the
Yeah,
first draft.
right.
Well, thank you so much, Marjan. I really enjoyed talking to you. And you always learn more. When you love a book, it's great to delve deeper. So I appreciate your taking the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Pleasure, pleasure. Thank you for listening. I love interviewing authors because I always have questions when I finish the book, and I always learn something surprising. How cool is it that E.L. Doctorow, who Obama called one of America's greatest novelists, was Marjan's teacher at NYU? And the quote she said of Doctorow was perfect. The historian will tell you what happened. The novelist will tell you what it felt like. And that's, dear listeners, why we should read. Marjan's paperback comes out August 5th. So it's perfect for that beach bag. Go get it. And separately, I just want to say that I am thrilled. I have lots of listeners, but I'm less thrilled because I don't have that many ratings. So please, if you enjoy the show, will you please rate it wherever you listen to podcasts? 5 stars would be ideal. Thank you. Enjoy your holiday, and I will see you in 2 weeks.